Alrighty, so this was the fabric that I said I was going to switch out for pieces 4, 5, and 9. And I'm going to cut apart piece 7. Let's do number 7 first. Just so that guy doesn't get lost. Because I have that happen. Okie dokie. I should have put whatever. We'll just leave it. Okay, so piece 7 is going to be this pretty fabric. Right over here. So similarly with foundation paper piecing, you don't have to worry about grain line or anything like that. You could completely do this on a diagonal like this, and it would be fine because the paper stabilizes everything, so it's not going to shift. And when you square up a block, it's still going to have the paper in it. When you sew, it's probably going to have the paper in it. You could remove the papers when you're done. I would starch the block first, but I don't. I would square up the block before you remove your papers, is what I would do. Okay, so I'm going to put glue on the back, and again, a nice, generous seam allowance. It's getting a little bit close up there, but that'll still be good. So, with acute triangles like this, you have two choices. I have one method that it's in every pattern, I think post 2020, and that is how to work with tiny pieces. It has every pattern, every EPP pattern has how to deal with acute angles and how to use tiny pieces. This pattern does not have tiny pieces. You could use the tiny pieces method, which is in the patterns, not in this one, but in the other patterns. I didn't want to confuse you, but I do want to bring it up that I do have a different method for working with really tiny pieces. And the really short, simple version that you could very well use for this is I will glue baste two sides, sew everything else together on these two sides, then open that up and glue baste this to sew the rest of it together. So an example would be I would sew 4, 5, and 6 together. If I used the tiny pieces, this is only to describe the tiny pieces method. And I don't start hyperventilating because this is really, really simple. It just sounds really, really complex, and that's not my purpose. My purpose is just to show you that there is another method available if you don't like the way that the acute triangle method works. Okay, so let's pretend that I have sewn these together. I would glue baste this side and this side. Okay, let's pretend this would be taped here on this side, right? So we have that taped, and I would stitch all of this. Now this part is together, and I would glue baste this part right here, okay? And then I would stitch this side together. Are you with me so far? I hope so. It's one method for dealing with really small pieces so that we can have the wonderful precision of English paper piecing with the illustrativeness of foundation paper piecing. So that was a method that I developed for how to work with these really tiny pieces. Typically the piece is like, about yay big, but you could do it for this. I'm going to show you the acute method for this because this is still a size that is workable and doable. So I'm going to put glue. I'm not going to worry about the bottom because this is the shortest side, but I'm not going to worry about it right now because the acute triangle is the part that is going to be under normal EPP circumstances would be a real bear to deal with. But because we're using the mitered method, it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so make sure that the big part is glued down pretty well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces here, the two sides, and we're going to pinch and press and just pinch. You can feel it. You can't feel it on the video, but you can feel it under your fingers. So I hope you're following along. If not, stop and just give it a try. Okay, so then all we're going to do is just finesse that together. Okay? And I'm not going to worry too terribly much with this piece that this doesn't come to like a super exact corner, because we can kind of finagle that a little bit with when we're sewing the other pieces together. So then I'm going to put a little bit of glue over here and press that up. Okay, so that one is nice, pressed together. Again, you could use the tiny pieces, and the tiny pieces would just show one side and this side. And then once this is joined to 4, 5, and 6, then you open this part up here and move it over. And so 8 and 9 to piece 7. Okay, so there's that guy. We'll put that over to the side. Now we have curved piecing. We're going to come back over to this guy. So 8 and 9 are just going to be similar to 1 through 3. It's a straight edge. You're going to line up the pieces together. If you're using the mitered corners, they'll come to a really nice joint together. Oh, I do have to, I'll just show you this. This will be fun. I have to get the fabric going for piece 8, but that's all right. We'll do this here. Okay, so nothing different than what we have already done. Nice wide seam allowance. Cut off the little extra excess. Now an outside curve is a lot easier to wrap your head around than an inside curve. Let's see, this is going to be my outside, so I'm going to put glue here and here and here. And you can see that I glue all the way to the outside because I want to make sure that I have nice flat seams. Okay, shortest edge. And then the next, this is just going to be the next easiest one. So with a curve, I start in the center of the curve and I work my way out and I just push it down, just like I've done with, I'm just pushing the seams down. I'm pushing toward the inside of the block. And I would not worry about any sort of bunching that you have on the back side. I'm not going to clip any corners when it's an outside piece. I'm just going to do it just like this, okay? And look how nice that is. Nice, super crisp corners and a really nice curve. I don't care about the back side of the block. I only care about what's going on in the front. Okay, so we're going to set that off to the side and we're going to do piece 4 and 5 and I'm going to cut those apart. And we're just going to kind of pick, that looks like a good place. Still make sure that you're leaving lots of room for all your pieces. Nice generous seam allowance. Sometimes I find that the pieces will shift. Typically I would cut a little bit closer, but because of the camera, it just makes it easier for me to just kind of hack at this. But I'm not really terribly concerned about losing just this little bit of fabric. Wrong scissors. Okay, we're going to trim up just a little bit of excess. So on piece 4, you can see that the curve is really, really gentle. It's not a really strong curve, and I wanted to give you something that was going to be an easy intro instead of, you know, something that's going to be really, really difficult. So it looks like it's pretty straight. Right here there's a tiny little curve, and you can see on the back of this one that I just treated it as a straight piece because this section is pretty straight. But what is a little bit hard to see is I did clip in these ones. So let's do the straight one first, because that makes it just a little bit easier to get that one out of the way. This is going to be the outside. Probably would have normally cut off all this excess, but that's fine. You just don't want to go under 1/4 of an inch. Oh, come on, glue. The glue's been sitting out now in the air, and it's starting to dry out. So, because I'm talking and explaining this, usually this doesn't happen, but that's okay. Just miter them and press them down nice and firm. You can see this one's starting to lift a little bit. That happens, and then I'll put glue on the fabric, or on the paper rather. Okie doke. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this just a little bit more, and that is probably, it's closer to 1/4 inch. Now if you find that your piece is a little bit flippy floppy and that's kind of driving you crazy, just put a little bit of glue on the back side to just hold it down. You might be thinking, oh my gosh, she uses a lot of glue, and that is true. But when you press it, it'll release the glue, so I'm not terribly concerned. Just make sure that it's a water-soluble glue and not anything permanent. So the distance that I go in is probably about 1/8 of an inch, and I don't want to clip all the way up here. I want to leave room for my needle to go through here, because it will start fraying if you clip up too high. And in that case, if you notice any sort of fraying, I would take that piece out and I would clip it again. On pieces that are a lot tighter, you want your clips to be closer together. So in that case, I would, do clips like this. I still like to use quite a sizable amount of room here. I don't think that I have ever purposefully gone under 1/8 of an inch. Maybe probably about 1/8 of an inch. So about maybe this much. I'll put my clips pretty close together, and then that will finesse the fabric around. Now, one thing that you may not believe about me is I have a very, very short attention span. I would say that probably kindergartners and fruit flies have a longer attention span than I do. Oh, I need glue on this side. So if a pattern does not come together easily and effortlessly for me, I bounce and it does not become a pattern because I want it to be really nice and easy for you. If it's frustrating for me, I know that it's going to be frustrating for you. So you can see that these clips just helped ease the fabric, and it just it spreads, kind of like peacock feathers. And it just helps the fabric to lay really nice and flat and not be bunchy. Okay, same thing as before. There's no difference at all as far as, glue basting those together. I've done the same thing. But I start with, if I have a curve, I start with a curve and I start in the middle and I work my way out. I think that one I did not. I think I did. Typically, I'll start in the middle because if you have the most pressure in the middle and it fans out, it will distribute pressure evenly. What I have noticed, and I probably didn't do it with this one because it's such a gentle curve that it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter. But if you, again, going back to something that has a tighter curve, if you start on one side and work your way out to the other side, the fabric is going to become really bunchy on the back. You can always lift it up and move it and all that, but it's easier to just do it right from the beginning and start at the middle and distribute the pressure evenly across the whole thing. And again, that's for a tighter corner or a tighter curve. You'll learn as you do this, you will learn and you'll develop kind of your own twist on these techniques and you'll find what works best for you. All right, we have 4, 5, 6, and where did 7 go? See, I've already lost it. You can probably see it, and I can't. What did I do? Oh, here, it's way over here. You couldn't see it. Thanks for your help, though. So I like to lay these out kind of where they're supposed to go. So I have an idea of what needs to go next. So for this, the directions say join 4 to 5, join 6 to 4, 5, join 7 to 4 through 6, and then set aside. And there are 2 ways that you can approach this. You can do just 4 and 5, and that is perfectly fine. I like to tape more than just one piece together, especially with this, because you kind of have a little bit of a larger section, and I'm just going to line these up. Sometimes I like to pull the tape back to see how it's lining up, and I like how that has lined up. There's a nice gentle curve there that is going to mirror the curve in piece 6. And I really like to make sure that my corners match up. And then, so let's pretend that this is on the inside. Let's pretend that there's another piece here. I want to make sure that my corners on either side are going to match up. Then if I have one piece, so if you have these 2 pieces, because they have a seam in them, are going to end up being larger than a solid piece. So sometimes you do need to ease them. So in that situation, which is not this situation, but just for future reference, sometimes you need to ease the piece together. So in that case, I will put pressure here and pressure here, and I will actually tape on the shorter piece and then have the longer piece, you know, again in the center, and then just put pressure as you go along. But that's not a today thing. I have a blog post on that. That should be a separate video, but I just wanted to address that because it does come up. And I do have a solution for that. Okay, so let's go back because I don't like taping it this way. I chose to put tape on this side first instead of on the other side because I have a seam here that needed to be joined together. Oh, and you might see that this side is a little bit higher. Piece 4 doesn't meet exactly on piece 5, and that's okay. They will when we sew them together. So I put tape on these, even though I just said that these sides are going to be a little bit longer than this, and that's because I put the tape here between 4 and 5. So I'm going to match up the edge of 6. And get that as tight as we can in here. Okay, so then you will sew 4 to 5, and you can continue your thread or you can break your thread, and you can sew all the way here, and then you can come back. There's not a right and a wrong way to do that. It's really up to you. Now let's talk a little bit about thread, because this is obviously different colors here than here. And on this piece, you can closely see that I used a gray for the whole thing. Actually, it was green. It was green. And you can kind of see a little bit, but it's not like, oh my gosh, that's hot pink, that's garish. Overall, I have noticed that it doesn't really matter what color thread you use. The only time that there has been any sort of, like, you can really tell is if you have white next to black. And in that situation, I think through what color would be less obvious in the block if it's showing through. Sometimes it's black and sometimes it's white. Most of the time I use, if I have black thread, or if I have black fabric and white fabric that are going to be next to each other, I almost always will use black or a dark color. Sometimes I'll use a gray because it's in between the two, because it's less noticeable if the black thread goes onto the white than it is for, like, the white thread to go into the black is just very, very noticeable. So that, you know, do whatever you want. I'm not going to judge you at all. I am not going to criticize you at all. I am going to be your biggest fan and champion. And the other thing that I have noticed is when it's quilted, you don't notice. So the colors that I use most frequently are these. They're the ones that are in my curated collection. These are the ones that I use the most. And most of the time, I don't care about switching thread. Okay, so for the sake of this video, let's pretend that we've already sewn. I am going to switch just because I feel like switching and for no other reason. Actually, what did I do with my thread? I'm not, because I have thread left. Do I have enough? Yeah, that'll get us through. Maybe a good portion of it. You can see that my rules are pretty fluid. All right, so as I did with this, I'm going to start with the inside and I'm going to work my way out. I'm going to pretend that I've already sewn 4 and 5 together, just because I want to show you how to sew the curve. There's not really a difference, but I just want to show you how I sew a curve so that you can see that it's not difficult or challenging or hard. And you can see that I started to go into this piece here and it was too tight and difficult, so I just switched to the other side. So I can't speak with absolute certainty, but I would imagine that whoever developed or discovered this flat back stitch probably did so because of curved piecing, and this is where it really, really shines. In a lot of my older patterns, you'll see that I note when to use a flat back stitch, and you can just ignore that because I exclusively use the flat back stitch now. So you can see that there's no difference in sewing. The method for sewing is exactly the same. Oh, do make sure that you do not get the mitered corners in your stitching because those will cause lots of problems. Okay, so here I'm starting to get a little bit antsy. I don't like going in this direction. I like sewing in this direction. So I've just turned it around, and that's probably a place I was not so super careful. Probably a place where you might see my stitch. That's okay. The colors that I have chosen, I mean, as long as you're not using an orange when, you know, you have blues and greens and things like that, I don't think that it matters. But typically, even with foundation paper piecing, I don't think I mentioned this in the foundation paper piecing video, but I use a dark thread and a light thread. One color on the top and one color on the bottom. And what I notice with that is it just helps keep things kind of balances, because I'm using a lot of contrast between dark fabric and light fabric. And if I have a dark thread and a light thread, it just kind of helps even everything out, and the thread doesn't stand out as much when there is that contrast. Okay, my thread's starting to get a little bit bunchy, but you can see there's no difference. This is exactly the same as sewing piece 2 to 3. And I also wouldn't worry too much. The order of operations does not matter as much with English paper piecing. As long as you're sewing what goes right next to it, it doesn't entirely matter. I write them in a way that makes it easiest to read and understand. But if you have a different order that you want to sew your English paper pieces together, by all means, go for it. There is a lot more freedom in sewing English paper piecing than in foundation paper piecing. Okay, so I've gotten to the intersection or seam of piece 4 and 5, and I hope you can see that I just keep moving this little acute tail from one side to the other, and I just hold it down, hold down the next one, keep it out of my way. Okay, so this piece is starting to get a little bit short. I think I'm going to take maybe 1 or 2 stitches. I'm going to do that one. That's going to be my last one, and then my locking stitch. And then 1 stitch over to the right. I don't know if that's necessary. I just prefer to do it that way. Okay, and then we're going to do the figure 8 knot again. Gosh, sorry, I've gone too far. I'm used to having my camera like way up here, and then you can't, anyway, I just have a different camera positioning, and I'm not quite used to it. All right. So this is going to be identical. Do the little knot, wrap around, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, slide it down between your fingers. What the heck am I doing? I evidently cannot do this knot and tell you what I'm doing at the same time. Now, if you didn't see that, please slow the video down, stop the video, start it over. Do whatever you need to do. Go back and watch the first part. You can get it. I promise. You can get it. And if you have another knot that you would prefer to use, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't bother me. What works for you works for me, because it's not going to be my quilt. And you might find that you like using something totally different. If that works best for you, then that's totally fine. I would encourage you, when you're doing this stitch, to make sure that your needle is going on top of the template piece instead of underneath. And one thing that doesn't translate well from what I'm doing here to the screen in front of you is you can't see. You can't feel. Even if you were in front of me, you wouldn't be able to feel unless you are doing it yourself. You'll get a feel for, is this stitch going over or under the template piece? And if you feel your finger underneath, on your finger underneath, that the needle is like touching it, you'll just feel the difference between if the needle is on top of the template, or if it's on the bottom of the template. And when you're just beginning, I wouldn't stress too much about it. Okay, we're getting close. I'm curious to see if any of my stitches came through, because I feel like I felt it. It actually looks pretty clean. Oh, you can kind of see them. So I think that gives you permission that if I'm not entirely accurate 100% of the time, you don't have to be either. Okay, so we're going to tape piece 7 to piece 6. Can you see? This is just the same thing, over and over and over. And make sure that the inside of the block is going to line up, and get these nice and close. So, dealing with acute pieces when we piece does take a little bit of extra precision, just when we're getting up here. Because if you're taking, the pieces, taking stitches here, what can happen is you could actually be taking extra pieces from the back side of this fabric, which isn't an issue until you go to take the paper out, and you won't get as much of the paper out, and it could cause bunching. I don't worry about getting all of the paper out, but I do try to remove as much as I can. So we'll talk about that when we get there. And you can't remind me, but I wish that you would. So come on, brain. Remember. So I'm not going to start at that point because that would be more challenging than starting up over here. Oh. I do have this happen from time to time, and it's not really fun when that makes it into the block. Okay, twisty around. Sometimes I twist around, 2 or 3 times in a little section. That's okay. Okay, if like this, you're noticing that the piece there's a gap here. Can you see that there's a gap there? I'm not pulling this, by the way. It's just there's a gap. And I can tell when I'm sewing that there's a gap. I don't want to sew and just pull my piece over. I want to adjust the piece physically on the tape, because if I don't, then the seam is becoming wider and wider and wider, and we already have the issue of the fabric is never ever going to get all the way up against the paper piece or the template. There's always going to be just a little bit of room. So if you have that happen, it's best to pick up the piece. Don't detach it the whole way. Just move it over enough and then press it back down. So while we're on the topic of, oops, my piece doesn't fit, what do? You have 2 options. One is that you can, sometimes I have this happen where the piece just isn't fitting in very well. So then what I'll do is I'll lift up, let's just pretend for argument's sake, and this does happen. Sometimes it gets frayed. I lift it up, just a little bit, and then what I do is I pull the fabric and the template piece over so that it matches wherever it needs to lay down. So that's option, let's say that's option 2, because that's not the best option. I have noticed sometimes when I am folding, because I'm not always the most precise person when it comes to, if I'm doing a lot of folding and basting and all of that, sometimes I'm not as accurate as I could be, whether it be in the car or low lighting or whatever. And I think that I've gotten the piece basted properly, but I haven't really. And so I'll notice that there's extra fabric. These pieces aren't matching up. So what I have since learned is I'll hold it up to the light, or I'll just kind of feel to see, is there extra? You can, poke the section to see, is there extra fabric here that's not quite precise? And then I'll lift it up and then I will re-glue so that the piece matches, because I prefer not to have to fold things back because things get to be a little bit bunchy, but know that those are two options. So that's the first one that I would go with, and then the other one of folding the piece back. Okay, so let's go back over here and finish this guy up. Okay, so this is getting to be a little bit tight, and hopefully you can see, if I did not have this mitered, I would have a lot of bunching. So I'm going to go right up to that piece, and don't worry if your little piece is starting to flip up. Okay, so I'm going to move that guy over, and come over here. Okie dokie. So this is where I was saying that you want to be a little bit extra careful. So we're going to move this over, and again, you can feel that there is a difference in the thickness. So as I get closer to the top over here, I just want to be mindful of the amount of fabric that I'm taking from the right hand side, so that I'm only taking fabric from this side here and not from this side here. Because the other thing that can also happen is that instead of having a nice crisp tree like you have here, it can kind of become a little bit more splayed like this. Oh, I don't need that piece. I wouldn't be terribly worried about it because you can always take out your stitches. And you can always resew it. It's not, rocket science or brain surgery. Nobody is going to be injured if we don't sew this, completely precisely. Just move and adjust the needle. You can just bend. What I love about these needles compared to other needles is they bend really nicely. They don't, they just have a really nice bend. So it's almost an additional finger. So it moves with really great precision. And we're going to go right up to the tippy top. I don't know if you'll be able to see that really well, but it is up to the tippy top. So this video is getting plenty long, and you have all of the tools that you need to sew the block together. Okay, you know about taping. If you have extra tape here, do the obvious thing and take the tape off. You're not obligated to keep the tape here. You can take it off and you can move it. Sometimes I have to move the tape back because I don't like you know, how it is. And then I just cut it off just like that, and then I put my tape here. You know, or you say, oh, that tape is great. I'm just going to line these up just like this. That's great. Look at that. And again, I'm more concerned about what's going on the inside of the block than to worry. Like, look at this. Look at this. This isn't completely accurate right there. Do I care? No, I absolutely don't. Because I am more worried about what is going on here than what is going on the outside. So, you know, you're just going to tape this together just like you have with everything else, and you're going to just stitch it. So super simple. One last note that I did not directly address at the very beginning. Another thing that I really like about having a lot of extra seam allowance on these pieces is because we have a lot of little seams here between 6, 7, and what is this, 8 or 9, piece 8, that this section is going to be wider than this section. Now for a bottom section, you might think, oh, this is, you know, I need to ease right side to left side and then the middle and all of that. You could, you very well could. But my encouragement to you would be to cut all of your pieces longer so that if the situation arises where you need to have, you can see that this is way off here. And sometimes I even have even more than that, but I have plenty of fabric over here that I'm not going to worry about. You know, I need to make sure that this is eased in place. I would rather have this piece be flat because these with the seam allowances have splayed a little bit. That's just going to make for a block that lays nicer than to have bunching down at the bottom. So that's just my encouragement, to make sure that you have a lot of extra seam allowance on the outside for sure. You're an English paper piecing pro. You'll find that the learning curve for English paper piecing is so short because you have one stitch. It is the flat back stitch. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have enjoyed these videos. I hope that you've learned a lot. I hope that you are encouraged to try something new, whether it be picking new fabrics from your stash or trying a new method. I cannot wait for you to start on your English or foundation paper piecing journey. I look forward to seeing you in the Quilting Along group.